For thousands of years, Earth had been asleep under a blanket of white. The great cities were gone, covered by miles of ice. Mountains that once touched the sky were buried under frozen layers thicker than skyscrapers. The oceans had turned to glass. Winds whispered across empty plains where no sound of life remained. If someone had looked down from space, they would have seen only a silent, frozen marble drifting around the sun, calm, lifeless, forgotten. But deep beneath that icy skin, Earth still breathed, slowly, quietly, like a creature in hibernation. The last humans who had walked on the planet before the Great Freeze had not all perished. They had prepared. They had left behind something, machines, vaults, and memory cores sealed in deep caverns, waiting for a day when warmth would return. But that day never came. The cold stayed for centuries, then millennia. The world slept. No signal left Earth. The radio towers, satellites, and transmitters all died one by one. In the distant reaches of the galaxy, other civilizations took note. Earth, once noisy and bright, had gone completely silent. Its blue glow faded from cosmic charts, and the record keepers of other species marked it simply as extinct biosphere. Life, they said, had ended there, far away, on a world that orbited two suns. A group known as the Orkai Dominion kept old records of once living planets. They were not conquerors or saviors, just explorers, scientists, and observers. They had watched many worlds die and a few be reborn. When their probes finally returned to the solar system after more than 30,000 Earth years, the Orkai expected to find nothing, just a frozen sphere, a monument to time. But what they found instead made them pause. One of their orbital scanners detected something strange under the southern polar crust. Faint heat, a rhythmic pulse. Not natural, not geological, mechanical. At first they thought it was an error. Instruments often picked up old readings from the planet's magnetic field. But the data repeated and the signal was too consistent. It was almost as if the planet's heart was still beating, ever so slowly. The lead observer ordered a closer approach. The massive scanning ship entered Earth's orbit, gliding silently through the void. Cameras focused, sensors spread across the surface, and the old blue world came into view. The ice reflected sunlight like a giant mirror, stretching from pole to pole. Only the tallest peaks of old continents, perhaps the Himalayas or Andes, broke through the surface like the tips of ancient tombstones. The Orkai team studied these ridges, measuring the density and layers of ice, searching for any clue of what lay beneath. And then, under that quiet surface, they found something they could not explain. A pattern, perfectly geometric shapes, hundreds of them, buried deep under the crust. Squares, circles, lines that curved and connected like an enormous network. Not random formations, not ice fractures, but designs. Someone long ago had built beneath the ice. The Orkai had seen ruins on other planets, but none that remained so preserved, so untouched by time. They grew curious. If Earth's life had truly ended, perhaps it could be reborn. The scientists proposed what they called Operation Solar Rebirth, an experiment to restore the planet's atmosphere and water cycles by artificially melting sections of the ice. It wasn't a cruel plan. To them, Earth was just another cold world to study, a place to learn how frozen biospheres reacted to rapid thawing. They wanted to observe the chemistry of recovery, the physics of a planet warming after endless winter. So, from orbit, they began their work. Massive beams of concentrated light, invisible to the eye but powerful enough to shift weather, began to shine upon the surface. They targeted the polar regions first, slowly increasing temperature. The change was gentle at first, then rapid. Within a few months, the first cracks formed. Entire mountain-sized chunks of ice broke free and slid into newly forming seas. Ancient rivers trapped for millennia began to flow again. The Orkai recorded everything. Their data streams filled with numbers, pressure, temperature, refraction. To them, it was simply science. They had no idea they were awakening something alive. Under the surface, beneath the melting ice, lay the forgotten remnants of human engineering. Deep vaults built in the final years before the Great Freeze. Inside them, power cores, archive systems, even preserved DNA banks. Humanity's last insurance against extinction. When the ice began to melt, the heat seeped deep enough to reach those vaults, and the machines stirred. At first, it was only flickers, dormant circuits regaining charge, emergency systems checking for life signs. But soon old reactors began to hum, weak at first, then louder. A pulse rippled through the crust, a single wave of energy that confused the Orikai instruments. They thought it was a geothermal anomaly. They didn't realize they had just triggered Earth's awakening. In one of the deepest vaults somewhere under what had once been Asia, a small chamber filled with light. Rows of transparent capsules lined the walls, each one holding a still figure frozen in time. The systems began to evaluate oxygen levels, temperature, and biological safety. A mechanical voice, ancient but clear, whispered through the vault's silent halls. Environmental stability detected. Revival sequence initiated. The first capsule flickered, releasing a mist. The human inside remained still. The machine waited, checked again, then slowly raised the internal temperature. The ice around the person's body melted away. Fingers twitched. Eyes fluttered, and for the first time in tens of thousands of years, a human heart began to beat again. Up above, the Orikai noticed something new. Their sensors, tuned to measure the planet's natural energy, picked up faint radio signals. Not noise, patterned communication, a rhythm too structured to be random. At first, they thought it might be echoes from their own transmissions. But then a different frequency appeared, an ancient digital format, one not seen in the galaxy for millennia. It carried a message fragment, distorted and incomplete but clear enough to translate. System integrity, 72%, atmospheric instability detected. Initiating surface restoration protocol. The Orikai scientists froze in silence. Someone, or something, what on the planet had just spoken. The beam stopped. The melting slowed. The entire fleet shifted into a cautious observation mode. They began to scan deeper, down into the melted crust and old bedrock. What they found astonished them beyond reason. Massive tunnels, kilometers long, connecting hundreds of underground facilities. Inside them, power systems still running on backup mode, robotics moving with purpose, and deeper still, millions of stasis pods, each one holding a preserved life form. Humans. Perfectly preserved, suspended between life and death, waiting for the world to be safe again. The Orikai realized, with disbelief, that Earth had not died. It had only been sleeping. Humanity hadn't vanished, it had endured. As days passed, more vaults activated. Across continents, systems began reconnecting, forming a planetary web of communication. Machines woke up, transmitted data, and started rebuilding environmental balance, filtering water, restoring oxygen, reviving long-dormant seeds. The Orikai watched as the first signs of organized activity reappeared on their monitors. Heat signatures moving in patterns, electrical discharges matching power grid behavior, even lights glowing faintly beneath the thawing surface. Every new reading felt impossible. To the aliens, life wasn't supposed to survive under such conditions. No species should have lasted through an ice age that spanned thousands of generations, and yet, here it was. Humanity, scarred but unbroken, waking up beneath a sky that once belonged to their ancestors. One by one, the humans began to emerge, confused, trembling, struggling to breathe the air that had changed so much since they last saw the sun. But even in weakness they stood. They looked around at a world they barely recognized. Mountains reshaped by glaciers, oceans where cities once stood, and still, they felt something deeper than fear. Hope, because the world was no longer dead, and neither were they. From orbit, the Orikai recorded everything. One of their researchers whispered almost to themselves, "They survived." They actually survived. The crew didn't know whether to be afraid or amazed. In the darkness of the control deck, the commander of the mission stared at the blue planet, its ice still cracking and waters forming new clouds. He had seen many worlds die, none reborn like this. He gave a quiet order. Transmit findings to the Dominion Council. Tell them, Earth breathes again. The message carried across space, through relay beacons and communication lines, until it reached the archives of 1,000 worlds. And that was how the galaxy learned the truth. That the humans, the species long declared extinct, had survived both the freeze and the fire. The Orikai didn't know it yet, but their experiment had changed the balance of history. They had melted more than just a planet's ice. They had awakened the will of a race that refused to disappear. And as the first humans stepped onto the thawing ground, feeling the warmth of sunlight on their skin after ages of darkness, something inside them stirred, a silent promise that no matter what happened next, humanity would rise again. When the humans began to wake from their long sleep, the world they found was both beautiful and terrifying. The sky above was a soft mix of gold and gray, filled with clouds that had not moved for centuries. The air was heavy with moisture from melting glaciers. Huge rivers of water ran through what was once land, carving new paths and swallowing the old. It was not the same earth their ancestors had left behind, but it was still home. The first few people who woke up were weak and confused. Their eyes struggled to adjust to the light. Their skin felt the cold air for the first time in thousands of years. They didn't remember much, only fragments of stories told before they went into deep sleep. Some remembered families, cities, oceans, music. Others remembered only the promise, when the world heals, we will rise again. They looked around at the ruined chambers, at the glowing panels that had somehow survived, and they knew the machines had done their duty. The underground systems had protected them while the surface froze, while centuries passed above their heads, but now it was time to live again. High above them, in silent orbit, the Orkai observation fleet hovered like a ring of small moons. From their crystal-built ships, the alien observers watched the rebirth of a world they thought was long dead. Their scanners showed the movement of thousands of humans coming out of stasis chambers across the continents. The readings filled the alien screens with energy spikes and heartbeats. It was a sight no one in the galaxy had expected to see again. Humans walking the Earth. The Orkai scientists were stunned. They had studied thousands of civilizations, some that had vanished in war, some that had decayed through time, but none had ever survived after total planetary freezing. For them, humans were no longer just another extinct race. They were a mystery, a question that demanded answers. Down on Earth, the humans began to organize themselves. They moved slowly through the ruined tunnels of their vaults, exploring what was left of their old technology. Some machines still worked. Others were too damaged to repair, but one thing amazed them. The systems had somehow learned to maintain balance on their own. The vaults had evolved just like nature. Artificial intelligence modules had merged with environmental controls. The air, the temperature, even the soil conditions were regulated automatically. It was as if the planet itself had kept them alive. As more vaults opened, groups of people began to meet. They shared what little food was available and helped one another walk through the unstable terrain. They found broken communication devices and tried to restore contact between the vaults. The goal was simple: find others, rebuild, and understand what had happened during the long sleep. For weeks, they stayed near their underground shelters. The world outside was unstable. Massive floods carved deep scars through the continents. Mountains of ice cracked and fell into the new seas. The air was full of mist, and the sound of melting glaciers echoed like thunder. But even in all that destruction, there was beauty. Wild plants began to appear on the softened ground. Some were old species that had adapted to the freeze, hidden under snow for centuries, waiting for sunlight. Others were strange, mutated forms that had evolved in the dark, surviving on mineral energy instead of sunlight. Birds, small, bright, and fragile, returned to the skies. No one knew how they had survived, but their songs filled the air again. Humanity looked at these small signs of life and felt hope stronger than ever. The Orkai fleet kept watching, documenting everything. At first, the alien commanders debated whether they should reveal themselves. Some argued that it was best to observe quietly. Others believed they should approach and offer knowledge or help. After all, it was their solar beams that had melted the ice and awakened the humans, even if by accident. But the High Council on the flagship decided to wait. They feared that sudden contact might shock the newly awakened humans. The Orkai remembered the ancient warnings written in their history. Do not rush to guide a species just learning to stand again. Let them walk first. So they stayed in silence, hidden behind clouds and orbit, gathering data and watching. On Earth, the humans worked to understand what had happened. The digital archives they recovered from the old world told them about the Great Freeze, how global climate systems had failed, how wars and natural disasters had followed, and how the final generation had built underground sanctuaries to protect life. It was painful to read, but also inspiring. Their ancestors had refused to give up. They had planted the seeds of survival not for themselves, but for those who would come after. Now that hope lived through them. They began rebuilding. The old power systems were used to create heat and electricity. Hydro generators were placed in the fast-flowing rivers formed from melted glaciers. Food was grown in small greenhouses powered by light panels. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Weeks passed, then months. The planet continued to change. The oceans expanded, covering old land. Islands formed where mountains once stood. Earth was shaping itself into a new form, a mixture of old memories and new beginnings. But the humans noticed something strange. Every few nights, they would see lights moving high above the clouds. Not stars, not meteors, but slow, gentle movements like glowing eyes watching from space. At first, they thought it was just imagination. But the lights moved in patterns too perfect to be natural. Some of the more curious humans tried to send weak radio messages upward. They built simple transmitters using recovered technology. They sent out basic signals, greetings, requests, simple coordinates. For days there was no reply. Then one night, something answered. The humans gathered around their transmitter, watching as faint sounds filled the speaker. The signal was weak, more like music than language. A deep, rhythmic hum that rose and fell like waves. At first, no one understood what it meant. But the pattern repeated again and again, in perfect rhythm. It wasn't random. One of the humans realized that the pattern matched their planet's orbital frequency, an exact count of Earth's rotation around the sun. Whoever was sending the signal knew the planet intimately. They tried replying with their own signal, repeating the same rhythm. The humming paused, then changed slightly, as if acknowledging their response. That was the first silent handshake between Earth and the Orkai. Up above, the alien scientists celebrated quietly. Their attempt at gentle contact had worked. They didn't send voices or images, just a mathematical greeting. It was enough to tell the humans, "We see you. We mean no harm." But the Orkai didn't stop there. They began to study human activity more closely. Their scanners detected advanced adaptation happening at a speed they had never recorded before. Within months, humans were not only surviving, they were planning. They began mapping new territories, dividing tasks, and even recording observations of the changing world. Their scientists studied the weather, the soil, and the chemistry of the new atmosphere. It was clear. Humanity's instinct to explore and understand had returned stronger than ever. Yet even as hope grew, so did curiosity. Who were the Watchers in the sky? Were they friends or something else? Some believed the Watchers were divine beings, sent by the universe to awaken them. Others thought they were the cause of the melting, beings who had nearly destroyed the balance of Earth without realizing it. But instead of fear, there was mostly wonder. For the first time since awakening, people looked up not just to survive but to dream. One cold morning, as mist rolled over the valleys of melting ice, a strange sound echoed through the air. It was not thunder nor the cracking of glaciers. It was a soft hum, steady, deep, and far too perfect to be natural. People looked up and saw the clouds shifting, forming a circular shape. Through the gap, they saw a faint light, a smooth, metallic reflection gliding across the sky. It was one of the Orkai ships, moving low for the first time. No weapons, no aggression, just quiet observation. It hovered for a few moments, then released a series of light pulses that danced across the clouds. The humans recognized the same pattern as before, the mathematical greeting. This time they answered not with machines but with light. They used mirrors, fires, and reflective panels to send their reply in the same rhythm. For a brief moment, Earth and sky spoke without words. The Orkai commander watched from his observation deck, fascinated. "Remarkable," he whispered in his own language. "They rebuild faster than any species we've seen." His crew nodded silently, each one aware that history was unfolding before their eyes. They were witnessing not just survival but rebirth. They decided to record every moment, to learn, not interfere, but deep inside their minds, each Orkai officer felt something they had not expected to feel toward another species: respect. Days later, as the ships rose higher again into the sky, the humans gathered near the rivers and mountains, watching them disappear. They didn't know what those beings were or what would happen next. But they knew one thing for sure. If they were being watched, it wasn't because they were weak. It was because they had done something impossible. They had endured. And now, for the first time in thousands of years, they were not alone in the universe. The humans had now accepted that they were not alone. The strange lights in the sky no longer scared them. They gave them hope. The people believed that whoever was watching had somehow helped melt the endless ice and brought sunlight back to Earth. But no one really understood why, or how days turned into weeks and the skies above stayed full of motion. Every night, faint glows moved across the horizon, drawing lines in the dark. The watchers were studying everything: air composition, ocean growth, and the humans themselves. The planet that had once been frozen to silence was now alive with activity again. Rivers flowed through the valleys, new clouds formed and carried rain to lands that hadn't felt water in ages. From space, Earth looked like it was breathing again, blue, green, and golden under the sun. Far above, the Orikai fleet continued their work. What began as an accidental thaw had now become a carefully planned scientific operation. They called it Operation Solar Rebirth, a mission meant to study how a dead world could return to life. The idea was simple: restore sunlight balance, melt ice in stages, and track the evolution of weather and ecology. But Earth's recovery wasn't behaving like any other frozen planet they had studied before. It was faster, stronger, and unpredictable. Every time the ice melted, new layers of strange energy patterns appeared below. The Orikai couldn't explain it. It was as if something under the surface, something ancient, was working with the thaw instead of against it. One of their researchers made an observation that silenced the entire team. He pointed to the readings and said, "This planet, it's responding to us." At first, no one understood, but then as they looked closer, they saw it too. The Earth's crust was releasing controlled waves of heat in specific regions, almost as if guiding the melting process. Nature wasn't random here. It was intelligent. The Orikai had seen planets that resisted change, but never one that helped. They were starting to realize that humanity's old technology, the systems buried deep underground, were still working. The vaults built before the Great Freeze were now syncing with the planet's natural rhythm, releasing stored warmth at the exact moments the Orikai beams hit. This wasn't luck. It was legacy. Meanwhile, the humans on the ground were living through a miracle they didn't yet understand. The sun felt warmer each morning, and the days grew longer. The melted water formed great lakes and rivers that carried minerals across the new land. Forest seeds preserved in ancient vaults began to sprout again. Small communities formed near the riverbanks. People used fragments of old solar panels to create simple tools and shelters. They shared stories by the fire, their voices echoing across open land that hadn't heard laughter in centuries. For them, it wasn't science or technology. It was the return of life itself. But with the melting came danger too. Old mountains began to collapse, and large floods swept through valleys as ice cracked open from beneath. Humans had to move fast to higher ground, yet they didn't complain. They said it was a sign that the world was healing, and healing always came with change. In one part of the continent, the melting revealed massive metallic structures under the ice. The humans who found them thought they were ruins of ancient civilizations, but when they touched the smooth metal walls, they felt a vibration like a pulse. They didn't know it, but those were the same vaults the Orikai had detected, the remains of humanity's last defense systems, now awakening. The watchers above recorded the event carefully. They saw how humans approached their own forgotten technology with curiosity and respect, not fear. And then, something happened that changed the course of Operation Solar Rebirth forever. During one of the large melts near the equator, an Orikai beam hit an area full of submerged tunnels. It caused a massive surge of energy to burst upward from below the ground. For a few moments, the Orikai ships lost connection with their scanners. Then a shock wave of electromagnetic energy spread across the atmosphere. When the sensors cleared, what they saw left them speechless. All across the planet, lights had appeared. Small glowing spots on land and underwater, thousands of them, each connected in a perfect grid pattern. It looked like the planet had lit up from within. The energy wasn't dangerous. It was balanced, calm, and steady. The Orkai realized these were part of humanity's ancient planetary network, massive geothermal systems designed to regulate Earth's core temperature and atmosphere. They had been dormant for ages, but the aliens' beams had unknowingly reactivated them, and now, the planet itself was helping to finish what the Orkai had started. The humans saw the same lights from the surface. At first, they thought it was some kind of storm, but then they noticed something different. The temperature around them became more comfortable, the winds calmer, the air easier to breathe. The system was stabilizing the world again, just as it was programmed to do long ago. Some of the elders among the humans began calling it the second dawn. They believed their ancestors had planned all this, that even if the world froze for 1,000 years, Earth would one day awaken and take care of them again. And it seemed true. Wherever the lights appeared, life followed. Plants began to grow faster. Small animals emerged from hidden burrows, and the smell of earth and rain filled the air once more. High above, the Orkai commander watched the transformation and quietly said, "They are part of the planet. Their kind and their world. They are one." The words were not scientific. They were full of respect. The aliens realized they were witnessing not just recovery, but the rebirth of a relationship between species and their home world, something most advanced civilizations had lost long ago. They began to question themselves. Who are we to interfere with this? But it was already too late to stop the process. Earth was now fully awake. In the following months, the weather stabilized. Oceans found their balance, skies cleared, and sunlight reached places that had been dark for ages. Humans built new shelters using old materials from the vaults. They created farms, purified water, and began to map their surroundings. They didn't know about the ships watching them from above, or the operation that had started all this. They only saw a world returning to life, a sky that had given them light again. For the first time in their new age, they started sending signals into space, simple messages of gratitude. "Thank you, whoever you are," one of the messages said. "You woke us when we needed it most." The Orkai scientists received that signal and played it across their decks. The sound of human voices echoed softly through their translation systems. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a thank you. And that small message changed how the Orkai saw the entire mission. They realized they had not just melted ice. They had reignited the heart of a species. Operation Solar Rebirth had become something much greater than they had planned. Now, instead of studying the planet as an experiment, they decided to protect it from a distance. They began placing small satellites around Earth, not for control but for observation and safety, to make sure nothing harmed the planet again. They knew humanity would rebuild, and they wanted to make sure nothing interfered with that natural process. The commander sent a single message to the Dominion Council. The world once known as Earth is alive again. The species called human persists. Recommendation: no interference. Observation only. The council agreed, and so the Orkai began to withdraw their active beams, leaving Earth to heal on its own. On the planet below, the last of the great glaciers melted. Huge valleys opened where they once stood, revealing lakes so clear they reflected the sky like mirrors. The humans, stronger now, climbed to the high ridges and watched the sunrise. The warmth on their faces felt like a promise that life would continue no matter what happened before. They didn't know about Operation Solar Rebirth or the alien hands that had helped. They didn't know how close they had come to disappearing forever. All they knew was that the sun had returned, and with it their spirit. They began to write again, carving words and symbols on stone, building monuments to remember both the old world and the new. In those carvings, they left messages for whoever might come after them. We slept beneath the ice. The earth melted and we woke again. We remember those who dreamed of tomorrow. We live for those who will come next. From orbit, the Orkai ships drifted quietly, their engines barely glowing. They had finished their mission, but even as they prepared to leave, they kept watching, not out of duty, but out of admiration. They had learned something no science book could teach, that survival wasn't just about strength or intelligence. It was about the will to keep going, even when everything else ends. As the fleet slowly turned away from Earth, one of the young Orokai scientists whispered, "They didn't just survive the cold, they survived time itself." And far below, under a bright blue sky, the children of humanity ran through green fields that had been frozen for ages, laughing as if the world had just begun again. The planet that once slept in silence was now full of life, light and the sound of hope, the sound that could be heard across the stars. Months passed after the great melting began. The sun now shone fully across the sky, warming the planet that had been asleep for thousands of years. The humans had grown stronger, wiser, and more organized. They built small shelters, learned how to purify water, and started planting seeds in the soft ground. For the first time since awakening, they didn't just survive, they began to live again. Every morning, people stood outside and watched the horizon glow gold and pink. The air was fresh and full of life. The birds that had returned filled the silence with song, and the rivers, once locked under ice, now ran freely, sparkling under the sunlight. From space, the Orokai observers saw this new Earth taking shape. Green valleys, blue oceans, and traces of human settlements rising from the ruins. But even as they watched, their sensors picked up something strange beneath the surface of the planet. At first it was faint, a low vibration deep inside the crust. The readings looked like seismic activity, but the rhythm was too even, too precise. It wasn't nature, it was a pattern. The Orokai began a new study, sending deeper scans through the planet's layers. What they found confused even their most advanced systems. Beneath the crust, below the layers of rock and old ice, were vast networks of energy. Geometric lines, perfectly symmetrical, stretching across continents. They weren't natural formations. They were built. It looked like the remnants of a massive power system, something that had been asleep, buried, and now slowly awakening with the planet. The aliens didn't realize it yet, but what they were seeing was the Earth Core Network, a system created by humanity's ancestors before the Great Freeze. It was designed to keep the planet alive, even when life on the surface couldn't survive. Now, after thousands of silent years, that network was waking up again. On the surface, humans began to feel it too. The ground often trembled softly under their feet, not enough to cause harm but enough to be noticed. At first they thought it was the settling of ice and earth after the melt, but soon they began hearing faint, deep sounds at night. It was like the heartbeat of the planet, slow, powerful, and constant. Some people started calling it the Earth's pulse. They believed it was a sign that the planet was truly alive again, but others were curious and wanted to understand it. They began digging near the old vault entrances, looking for the source of the vibrations. Beneath layers of frozen soil, they found strange metallic plates, smooth and covered in symbols no one could read. When touched, these plates glowed faintly, like they recognized human presence. No one could explain it. The humans didn't know they were standing on the surface of ancient reactors built long ago to feed energy directly to the Earth's core. As days passed, the ground began to hum with stronger energy. The sound echoed through valleys and mountains, creating a faint but steady rhythm. The humans grew used to it. They even found it comforting. It was as if the planet itself was breathing with them. But up above, the Orokai fleet grew worried. The energy levels were rising quickly and the readings made no sense. The aliens feared their melting process might have activated something dangerous underground. They sent small drones into the atmosphere to scan the deeper layers of the crust. What they discovered left them silent. The network wasn't just reactivating, it was expanding. Energy was spreading across the surface, connecting vaults, cities, and regions that had been frozen for ages. The pattern looked like a neural map, a brain, alive and thinking. Back on Earth, people began noticing new lights emerging at night. Tiny blue and green dots appeared across hills and valleys, following lines invisible during the day. Some called them the veins of the Earth. The humans didn't realize it yet, but those glowing lines were old energy conduits coming back to life, pathways that carried power between underground systems. Wherever the light passed, the land became fertile faster. The soil grew rich, plants sprouted more quickly, and the air smelled cleaner. The humans started calling these glowing paths the lifelines. They followed them, studying where they led, believing that at the end of each glowing trail, they might find something important, maybe more survivors or hidden technology that could help them rebuild. And they were right. One group followed a glowing trail across an open plain. After 2 days of walking, they reached the entrance of another underground chamber, one that had been sealed long before the Ice Age. The metal door was massive and half buried in mud. Strange markings ran across its surface, glowing softly like the light of a living thing. When they touched it, the door trembled. A low tone echoed through the air, followed by a deep rumble from within the ground. Then, slowly, the door began to open. Warm air rushed out, carrying the scent of old machinery and metal. Inside, there were tall structures, glowing tubes, and soft blue light filling the room. The people stepped in carefully, not knowing whether they were walking into danger or salvation. Inside the chamber, they found something incredible. Machines still working after thousands of years, monitoring Earth systems and adjusting energy flows to keep the planet stable. And at the center of the chamber was a large, transparent capsule, glowing faintly. Inside it was not a person but a machine shaped like one, an ancient AI built to manage the planet's balance during the freeze. When the humans approached, the capsule released a soft tone. Then a voice echoed through the room, calm, mechanical, but warm. Human presence detected, it said. Reactivation complete. Surface restoration, 75%. The people stared in silence, unable to believe what they were hearing. The voice continued. You have returned. The Earth remembers you. Far above, the Orkai detected the same transmission. They intercepted the signal and translated it, realizing that the humans had just reconnected with their planet's ancient defense systems. This wasn't just survival anymore. Humanity had woken up, not only themselves, but their world's memory. The Orkai Council debated what to do. Some believed they should stop the energy spread before it became uncontrollable. Others argued that interfering might destroy the delicate balance forming between the planet and its inhabitants. After long discussion, they decided to wait, to observe what humanity and their world would do next. The lead commander said quietly, "Let them finish what they started ages ago." On Earth, word spread quickly about the glowing chamber and the voice that spoke. People traveled from far distances to see it. For the first time, there was unity among the scattered survivors. They believed this was proof that the world itself was helping them rebuild. The glowing network spread across the continents. In some places, new plants grew overnight. Rivers that had been muddy and cold turned clear and fresh. Even the air felt different, lighter, full of quiet energy. The planet was healing faster than anyone expected. Humans built small villages near these glowing points, using the warmth from the underground systems to stay safe through the colder nights. They learned how to channel the energy using simple tools, lighting homes and powering devices left over from the old world. They didn't understand the full science of it. They just knew it worked. For the first time in memory, the night wasn't dark anymore. But deep below the surface, something even more powerful was happening. The reactivated systems were slowly waking up the main planetary core, the central AI that once guided Earth's balance. It was an enormous mind, built by humanity long ago, designed to merge technology and nature together. It had been asleep during the Great Freeze, but now it sensed human life again. The Orkai scanners picked up a signal pulsing directly from the planet's core. The frequency was so pure, so strong, that even their most advanced systems struggled to interpret it. It was not a distress call. It was a greeting. A message that traveled across oceans and into space, written in simple mathematical rhythm. We are alive. That message reached the Orkai flagship. The commander listened to the translation and stared at the blue planet glowing below. He turned to his crew and said quietly, "They are not rebuilding their world. They are reuniting with it." And he was right. Every human movement, every step they took seemed to awaken something else, machines, systems, memories. Earth was no longer a planet being repaired. It was a living being, responding to the return of its children. 1. Night as the skies glowed with the shimmer of the Orkai ships far above. A storm of green light danced across the heavens. It was unlike anything the humans had seen. Not lightning, not fire, but waves of color moving gracefully, as if painting the sky. People came out of their shelters to watch. The children pointed upward, their faces glowing in the light. The elders said it was the earth saying thank you. The scientists among them thought it was a natural reaction to the new magnetic balance. But no matter what anyone believed, they all felt the same thing. A connection, a feeling that they weren't just living on Earth anymore. They were living with it. The Orkai recorded the phenomenon from space, naming it the living aurora. They had seen many planets reform after disasters, but never one that seemed to celebrate its own awakening. And as the last of the ice melted, and new forests began to cover the land, both humanity and the watchers above knew that the true story of Earth was only beginning. The planet that once froze to silence now spoke again, not through words but through life, color and rhythm. The heartbeat beneath the ground grew stronger each. The sun had now risen high over the new Earth. The ice that once ruled every corner of the planet was gone, replaced by rivers, forests, and life trying to find its way again. Humanity, though small in number, had learned once more how to live with the land. The people had built small villages near the glowing lifelines, those soft blue streams of light that spread under the ground and filled the soil with warmth. They used stones, wood, and metal remains from the old world to make homes. They had no kings, no countries, only unity. Everyone worked together because survival had taught them the same lesson. The only strength that lasts is the one that is shared. Each morning, they gathered near the lifeline points to collect warmth and light for their tools. Their old machines had been dead for centuries, but the energy from below could bring some back to life. Lights flickered again. Old panels glowed, and screens that had been dark for ages began to hum faintly. It was as if the world was whispering, "I remember you." At night, the sky was full of movement. The auroras danced constantly now, bright green, blue, and gold waves that shimmered like flowing rivers above the clouds. People said they could almost feel the Earth's pulse in those lights, as if the planet itself was breathing alongside them. Some believed these lights were the spirit of their ancestors returning. Others said it was science, the result of the planet's new balance. But no matter what they believed, the feeling was the same. Comfort, hope. The air was warm, the soil rich, and food was growing again. Humanity had found its rhythm, but far above, the Orkai were still watching. Inside the command vessel of the Orkai fleet, their scientists were baffled. The human race had not only survived the freezing and the melting, they were adapting faster than any known species ever had. Their biology showed extreme flexibility. Their energy signatures showed synchronization with planetary frequencies. To the aliens, this was impossible. One Orkai researcher said quietly, "They were never meant to last." But they did. The commander responded, "They do not just endure the change. They become the change." Every few days, the Orkai recorded new data. Their instruments showed the planet's temperature stabilizing far faster than their calculations predicted. The reason was simple. Humanity was rebuilding the balance of nature. They weren't using weapons or machines to control the planet. They were working with it, the same way their ancestors once did. It was something the Orkai had long forgotten, cooperation with nature, not domination of it. On the surface, people were now exploring far beyond their settlements. Groups traveled across old, half-flooded cities searching for ancient knowledge. Under broken towers and rusted metal, they found fragments of data drives, pieces of history from before the Great Freeze. Some of these drives contained recordings of how humanity once lived. Music, laughter, children playing, and the endless noise of the old world. When they played those recordings at night, everyone gathered around to listen. The sound of the past filled the air, a reminder of what was lost and what they were now rebuilding. No one cried. Instead, they smiled, because for the first time they didn't feel like the last humans. They felt like the first ones, starting again on a new Earth. One day, a group of explorers followed a lifeline through an old valley. The line led them to a massive structure, hidden beneath layers of melted rock. It wasn't made by nature. It was human. They cleared the entrance and stepped inside. The air was cool and filled with a gentle humming. On the walls, strange symbols glowed faintly. At the center of the vast chamber stood a tall column of light, the same kind of energy they had seen in the underground vaults before. When they approached it, a soft voice echoed through the chamber. Human presence confirmed. Phase 2 restoration active. The explorers froze, unsure what to do. The voice continued. Surface reconstruction will proceed. Please remain within safe zones. The planet is adjusting. Before they could respond, the floor beneath their feet vibrated. Outside, the ground began to shift and reshape. Rivers changed direction, valleys deepened, and the soil itself seemed to move with purpose. It was the planet healing itself, rebuilding its balance with precision. The explorers ran back to their village to tell others what they had seen. Soon the entire community gathered to witness the changes. The Earth wasn't chaotic anymore. It was deliberate, gentle, alive. Far above, the Orkai scientists could barely believe what their sensors showed. The planet was adapting faster than even their controlled worlds. The balance between atmosphere, soil, and temperature was now self-sustaining. It was as if Earth no longer needed to be managed. It was managing itself. But what shocked them most was that every change matched human settlements. The planet seemed to be reshaping itself around humanity, protecting and nurturing them as if recognizing them as part of its system. One alien whispered, "It's like they are one organism." The commander watched the blue planet below and said softly, "Maybe they always were." Meanwhile, humanity continued to rebuild. Small schools were formed. Children were taught to read, write, and understand both the new and old world. The elders told stories of how the world froze, and how the people who came before had prepared for this day, building machines and vaults that could last longer than memory. The children listened, wide-eyed, full of wonder. Every evening, people gathered around the fire and spoke of their plans. Some dreamed of rebuilding great cities. Others wanted to live simply, close to the lifelines and forests. But all of them shared one dream: to make sure the Earth never fell into silence again. They began planting vast gardens not just for food, but for the planet's balance. The lifelines fed these gardens with warmth from below, and within weeks, green spread across lands that had been gray and barren for ages. It was a sight so beautiful that even the stars seemed to shine brighter at night. But something new was happening too. The lifelines started sending pulses of light upward, reaching into the sky like faint beams. These pulses carried signals, patterns of data, which the Orkai quickly intercepted. When decoded, they revealed something incredible. The signals were messages written in human code. The ancient network was learning from the people again. It was evolving alongside them. The aliens realized that the planet's system was absorbing human knowledge, understanding their languages, and mirroring their thoughts. Earth had become a living extension of its people. This discovery sent a wave of confusion through the Orkai command. They had studied thousands of civilizations, but never one where the planet and its inhabitants had fused into a single harmony. The commander finally said, "We melted their world and they turned it into something greater." Weeks passed, and Earth continued to change. The oceans became clearer, forests grew tall, and the once polluted skies turned pure. The lifelines pulsed in rhythm with the humans' daily lives, as if the planet watched over them, guiding their growth. And then came the day that changed everything. A deep sound echoed through the earth. Not a quake, not destruction, but a powerful tone that resonated in every living being. The humans stopped what they were doing. Animals froze. Even the wind seemed to pause. From the ground, pillars of soft light rose into the air, spreading across continents. These lights carried warmth and calm, not fear. They painted the sky with shifting colors, forming patterns that resembled symbols from ancient human scripts. It was as though the earth itself was speaking, not with words, but with emotion, light, and rhythm. People fell silent. Some knelt. Others simply closed their eyes and listened. Everyone understood the message, even without translation. It was gratitude. The planet was thanking them for returning. From their ships, the Orkai saw the event unfold. The readings showed an immense wave of energy spreading across the atmosphere. But instead of destruction, It created stability. The planet's magnetism strengthened, its radiation shield expanded, and its orbit balanced perfectly. Earth was now alive in every sense. The Orkai commander stood at the viewing deck, watching the colors dance across the surface. His voice was quiet when he spoke. We believed we were studying the end of a world, but we were witnessing the rebirth of one. The others nodded in silence. For the first time, the aliens felt something new. Respect, even awe. They realized that no amount of technology could create what humanity had achieved through endurance, pain, and hope. They had faced the ice. They had faced the fire. And they had survived both. Down below, life continued. The people built stronger homes, schools, and farms. They sang songs again using old words and new meanings. They told their children that Earth was not just a home. It was a companion that had waited for them to return. And at night, when they looked up at the stars, they could almost sense that someone out there was watching. The Orkai fleet, silent but present. But this time, humanity didn't fear them because deep inside, they knew one truth. Even if the universe forgot them once, it could never erase them again. They were the species that endured the impossible, not through power, but through unity, love, and will. The planet had changed. The stars had shifted, but one thing remained The Earth was no longer the frozen tomb it once was. The air shimmered with warmth. The oceans glowed under the sun, and green stretched endlessly across the continents. The people had changed too, stronger, wiser, and deeply connected to the planet that had once almost destroyed them. Every heartbeat of the Earth matched their own now. The lifelines pulsed softly through valleys and plains, lighting the night like rivers of stars. Children played near them, dipping their hands into the glowing streams, laughing when sparks of light swirled around their fingers. The people had learned to live with nature, not over it. They had become one with the rhythm of the world. From the sky, the Orkai ships floated silently, watching everything. For months, their scientists had been collecting data, trying to understand how this fragile species had managed to do what entire civilizations could not. The reports made no sense. By logic, humans should have vanished long ago. Yet there they were, alive, adapting, thriving. One of the Orkai leaders stood at the viewing deck, staring at the planet below. The blue world glowed softly against the darkness of space, wrapped in the same light that now protected it. They have changed their planet, he whispered. Or maybe their planet changed them. The rest of the council listened in silence. Down on Earth, life had returned to rhythm. Villages had turned into small towns. People shared knowledge freely, rebuilding schools, windmills, and communication towers. The air was full of laughter again. Songs of hope echoed in the evenings, and every new sunrise brought the smell of life, soil, rain, and renewal. But something strange began happening. One night, as the people sat around their fires, the sky shimmered with unfamiliar colors. The auroras that usually danced gently now moved faster, brighter, like waves of fire and water mixing together. The lifelines under the ground began to glow stronger, pulsing in rhythm with the light above. The humans watched in awe. They didn't feel fear, only wonder. Then the ground beneath them hummed, not shaking, not breaking, just vibrating with a calm, powerful rhythm. It felt like the entire planet was preparing to say something. A deep, soft sound rose from the earth. It wasn't thunder, it wasn't wind. It was something else, something alive. The sound traveled across mountains, over oceans, through forests. The birds took flight. The oceans rippled. Even the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter. And then, across every lifeline, a single beam of light shot upward into the sky, millions of them all at once, spreading across the atmosphere like veins of fire. The people gasped as the beams merged, forming one enormous pillar of golden light that reached beyond the clouds, far into space. In orbit, the Orkai sensors went wild. Every system detected the surge. The commander rushed to the observation deck. The blue planet below was shining brighter than ever before. "What are they doing?" one of the officers asked. The readings showed something impossible. The planet was transmitting a signal. Not to the Orkai fleet, but across the entire galaxy. The message wasn't a language, at least not one the aliens could immediately understand. It was a pulse, a pattern, a heartbeat multiplied 1 billion times, reaching across the stars. At first, the Orkai thought it was random, but as the signal stabilized, they realized it wasn't noise. It was communication. The planet itself was speaking. Back on Earth, the people could feel it too. The air shimmered gently and everyone stopped whatever they were doing. The older ones raised their hands to the sky. The younger ones watched in silence. They couldn't hear words, but they felt something in their hearts. A warmth, a message carried not by sound, but by emotion. It was as if the planet was saying, "We are whole again." Tears filled people's eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling that they had finally become part of something greater than themselves. For the first time in history, humanity didn't feel alone, not in spirit, not in purpose, not in the vastness of the universe. Far beyond the solar system, other civilizations began picking up the same signal. Across distant galaxies, receivers and satellites blinked alive as the wave of light reached them. The message was everywhere now. The same rhythm, the same pattern. A living planet announcing its rebirth. Some believed it was a warning. Others thought it was a miracle. But all agreed on one thing. Earth was alive again and it carried the voice of its people. Inside the Orkai fleet, silence filled the bridge. Every monitor displayed the same pulse, the light from Earth spreading outward like ripples in water. The commander sat quietly, watching. "They have sent their heartbeat into the stars," one scientist said softly. The commander replied, "No, the planet has." There was a long pause before he added, "And it carries the sound of its children." The Orkai High Council, light years away, received the data later that cycle. They had expected destruction, chaos, or collapse, but instead, the report described harmony, a species that had survived the coldest age, the burning melt, and the loss of everything, yet still found a way to rise again. The council chamber fell silent as they watched the final visual transmission. A view from orbit. A vast ocean shimmering with light. On one of the continents, a human stood near the shore, holding a small piece of metal high into the air. The Orkai systems focused on the object. It was a flag, not of war, not of power, but of remembrance. At its center was a simple symbol, a circle divided by a line, half light and half dark. It represented Earth's past and present, the freeze and the fire, the death and the life. Below the image, an audio signal came through, translated into the Orkai's language. Only a few words. "You can melt the world," the voice said, calm and steady, "but you cannot unmake us." The Orkai Council members looked at each other in silence. For thousands of years, they had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. They had witnessed worlds destroyed by greed, power, or time. But never before had they seen one rise again after total extinction. And not only rise, but sing back to the universe. They sent one final order to their fleet. "Withdraw. Let them be." The ships began to turn slowly, one by one, leaving orbit. No weapons, no warnings, no analysis. Only respect. Before they left, the Orkai commander took one last look at the blue planet glowing below. "They will outlast us," he said quietly. "They are the memory of the stars." Down on Earth, life continued without knowing the full scale of what had happened. The people didn't see the alien fleets retreating, didn't know that their signal had reached thousands of worlds. They only knew that something had changed in the air, a peace deeper than anything they'd ever felt. The lifelines still pulsed, softer now, in rhythm with the quiet songs the people sang each night. The Earth's hum was steady and calm, no longer desperate or chaotic. The balance had returned. The frozen silence of the past was gone. The chaos of melting was gone. Now there was harmony between land, sky, and the beings that walked upon it. As generations passed, the story of how the world froze and melted became legend. Children were told tales of how their ancestors survived the Great Cold and the Great Flood, how they built vaults deep underground and trusted that one day they would return. The people didn't see themselves as heroes. They saw themselves as caretakers, the guardians of a planet that had given them everything. In every settlement, there were monuments, not of stone or gold, but of light, made from the glowing energy that still flowed beneath the ground. Each monument carried the same message carved simply in their language. We endured. Far beyond Earth, in the endless black of space, the Orkai ships traveled quietly, carrying the memory of what they had witnessed. Across galaxies, stories began to spread of a blue planet that refused to die and a species that turned destruction into rebirth. Other worlds began searching their own histories, wondering if they too had forgotten how to live in balance. The humans had not just saved themselves, they had reminded the universe of what life truly meant. On Earth, as centuries rolled by, the people built new cities, not like the ones of the old world, filled with steel and noise, but ones made with care, flowing with the land instead of standing above it. The lifelines continued to guide them, glowing gently under their feet. The planet stayed warm and kind, its skies clear, its oceans alive. When storms came, they were not feared. When rain fell, it was celebrated. The earth and its people had become one. And whenever children asked their elders what the lights in the sky were, pointing to the distant stars, the elders would smile and say, "Those are the ones who melted our world and learned that we could not be erased." In time, even the stars seemed to echo with the rhythm of Earth's heartbeat. Across the cosmos, the message that once began as a single pulse of light still traveled, touching distant civilizations, reminding them of a simple truth, that survival is not about power, that hope is not about chance, that the human spirit, no matter how cold the night or how fierce the storm, always finds its way back to the light. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the galaxy, the faint echo of that ancient transmission still whispered through the stars, "We are alive,